Hello and welcome back to the Empire of the Cop podcast. We've got Peter Kenny Jones here today. I'll be your host, Farrell Keeling. We've got a special guest here, the Redman TV's Paul Machin. Paul, how are you doing?
Yeah, very good. I was trying to work it out. I think it's been 12 years since I was on the Empire of the Cop podcast. It was a very, very, very early days of what we were doing. So yeah, long-awaited return.
A different lineup as well, I'd imagine.
Yeah. Infamously, it was a guy called Ben Carr, Dr. Benji, who's gone on to be one of the preeminent football manager streamers, who was the host back in those days. So what I'm saying, it's a very good breeding ground for success, is the Empire of Cop podcast.
That'll be music to Pete and myself's ears. Certainly,
day,
well, yes. I mean, Empire wasn't the only one to change their lineup, though, of course, because Jurgen Klopp experimented a little bit himself in the 1-0 FA Cup replay win over Wolves. And what an improvement in performance that was. And speaking of which, I mean, firstly, Paul, I just want to get your general thoughts from that game, because I think it's fair to say, even if it wasn't our best performance of all time, the difference was absolutely significant.
Yeah, it felt like like Liverpool again, and not in the way that I think people go on about Klopp, and they go on about like heavy metal football gets used far too much as an idea and a concept or what have you. The really good Jurgen Klopp Liverpool were just very, very difficult to beat. They just wear you down, they tire you out, they'd figure you out, you wouldn't be able to breathe, you couldn't get out, you couldn't pass. And, this wasn't true vintage of that, but it certainly was more akin to it than I think we've seen, certainly in the last few weeks.
And yeah, just as an extension of that, I think obviously the most interesting part for me were the additions of Naby Keita and I may butcher his surname, but Stefan Bajcetic, who I think, just for an 18-year-old, I mean, he just doesn't look 18, does he? It was a phenomenal performance for a player of his age. Obviously, we've seen the warning signs of Harvey Elliott in terms of not wanting to put too much pressure on a young lad's shoulders. They should be there to develop. We shouldn't be relying on them for our season. But obviously, we're in a position where we know Jurgen Klopp historically loves to reward, he's all about meritocracy. So, on that basis, and it seems insane to suggest, but should we really be seriously considering starting exactly the same midfield against Chelsea?
I see no why not. I mean, you're right. I think there's a temptation to get carried away, and sometimes there's a temptation not to get carried away. It's nice when you see a really good footballer come in and hold their own. The great example I thought of, and I thought this after the Man City League Cup game with Bajcetic, was Trent Alexander-Arnold coming in at Old Trafford and being fine. Just being doing a fine job at right back, but no one really went, well, that's therefore he's going to become the best right back on the planet. But really good footballers take their experiences and they have a little break, and then they come back and they're much better players for it. And again, different levels of opponent, different environments, of course. But yeah, Bajcetic looked far more ready in that Wolves game than he did a few weeks earlier. So yeah, it's an interesting conundrum because Liverpool need another DM. They need someone who can bare minimum rotate Fabinho, and if he's only that, I think that's a really huge step up for them and a very, very good prospect indeed if he can do that. Does it mean you have to start every game from here on in? Probably not, but it's nice. It's just nice to have the option.
Yeah, I think carrying on from that as well. Yeah, I agree. I think watching Bajcetic and Thiago, it was just like watching two brothers when they're playing together. They just seem to know each other so well. And obviously, there's been a lot of the pictures shared online of the dads playing together at Celta Vigo. And obviously, they must have learned a lot because it seemed to have stayed in the blood, doesn't it? Because them two it was amazing how, I think Klopp said afterwards, didn't he? He wasn't sure if Bajcetic knew every time that he was turning the corner, he was going to end up with a Wolves player on the backside behind him, but he kept trying it, and that's the confidence you like. I think people like Keita, Curtis Jones, attacking midfielders, you almost forgive them once or twice giving the ball away because you need to take a chance and try and beat a man, make a pass. But for him to be doing that in the number 6 position, as you say, where if he makes a mistake, they can go and score. Obviously, everything goes right. It's unbelievable, but you worry that maybe one goes wrong, so maybe Klopp may try and calm him down a bit, which maybe some fans won't be too happy with. But watching them two, and you've got to say Naby Keita as well, who's definitely got his fair share of critics. Those three, although they were pretty much a totally new midfield together, but watching them, it looked like a totally different side, didn't it? And I think, yeah, I don't think anyone would be upset watching that same trio play against Chelsea. And I'm sure that's what Farrell said as well. Like, so, but yeah, maybe we look ahead to Chelsea, and I know you've just touched on what we do with the midfield, but then maybe Nunes coming back and Gakpo. Do you think Gakpo deserves or not maybe not deserves, but should be given a chance to come off the bench and see what he does, or what do you reckon Klopp does with the front three? Paul Farrell.
Yeah, God, I don't mind. Yeah, I think you're right. Nunes, his fitness will be huge on what we're doing. I think one of the little takeaway from that game was Gakpo playing central, and I think a little bit of that was just out of necessity. But actually, if you really wanted stability, if the plan was to play Gakpo from the left consistently, they could have tried Carvalho central. Like they could have gone for that. He's definitely got more career experience playing central than he has playing off the left of a front three. And so I do wonder whether we got a little hint there of Gakpo doing the closest approximation of Roberto Firmino. And we might therefore see a little bit more of that come to Chelsea. I hope so, because I just think Nunes is just he's so electric off the wing, and he can get goals from there as well. I think that's a really interesting question that the manager will be answering this week.
Yeah, I think I know I asked it, but yeah, I think I'd be happy to give Gakpo a chance to come off the bench. I think I was saying before with Farrell, we watch Robertson and Fabinho be spending months on the bench and not even in the squad, and then yet with Diaz and Gakpo, he seemed to maybe out of need more than what he wanted to do, but have to throw them straight in. So I think for Gakpo, it might be good to see come on against a tired defence. Thiago Silva's 42 or whatever old he is, so hopefully if you come at him and run at him in the second half, we might be able to see a new lease of life from him.
I think that the Fabio Carvalho question's an interesting one to pose, because I think one of maybe his second to last press conference, I think Pierce asked the question, sort of being like, "Oh, why aren't you selecting him? Like, is there an issue there?" And I think Klopp was very quick to kind of stamp any suggestion of wrongdoing out there. He said, "Look, he's training fine. It's just purely, a sporting decision." Do you reckon it's just merely the case, Paul, that had we been enjoying a much sort of more successful season, we're higher up in the table, we'd have the room then to sort of experiment with it? Because I think the most interesting thing about Carvalho is they don't have a position pinned down for him yet. I think the long term is midfield, but he's been initially brought in to supplement the forward line almost, even though he has offered minutes mainly on the left flank between both departments. Do you think it's more just a waiting game almost for him, maybe more of a case where we look back on this next season and they've got a better idea, perhaps he's bulked up a bit, that sort of thing?
Yeah. I mean, look, Jürgen always says, we've not bought a player for a year. We've bought him for the length of his contract and hopefully beyond. And Carvalho's got something, I think. He's really got something. The issue he's got, and it's a similar issue to Harvey Elliott, and you mentioned it there a little bit, the bulk is a bit of a thing. It's not the be-all and end-all. You can be small and strong. We've seen that with Thiago. You can see that with Naby Keita. Actually, he's really gone up at another level in the last 18 months in terms of, I don't want to say his physicality. I don't mean his availability. I mean his physicality when he is available. But Carvalho is an interesting one, because I definitely think he's much more suited to being central. I thought he was a little move towards, can he learn from Firmino, and can he start to be the Firmino understood? We've seen no signs of that yet, but I do think there was a general move to trying to get smaller, more skillful, more tricky players, more like what Man City do, where they had that constant rotation of lads who can play both eights but could also play across the front three. I don't know whether we're backtracking a little bit on that, because obviously, Bellingham's a 6-footer, Nunes is a 6-footer, Gakpo is as well, and whether we're starting to move actually away from that and more towards, again, more bigger, larger physical specimens. But I hope not. I mean, I hope someone like Carvalho, I say he's got an eye for goal. He's got real talent there. He's broken his duck already. He's already in the goals for us, which is a huge thing. So many players, promise so much and deliver so little at this club in the Premier League era that I can remember. But you're right. I think it might be one of those where he's just kind of got to find his feet this season And then when Liverpool find some stability, you'll find what he was bought for.
Yeah, well, I think, as you said, we've all been impressed. And he had that long break out the side, didn't he? And then we came back against City, he got the goal, and obviously we didn't end up progressing, but you thought, this will be where he kicks on, and he did go missing for a bit, didn't he? But he took his chance again. I think he looked exciting. And in the options there, you said the B word, you said Jude Bellingham, so it's your fault. We'll go over to maybe Muddy side. So there's a lot of worries that if you read everything and believe everything, Klopp's convinced him he's going to come to Anfield, but do we have the money? And then the money situation leads you over to the ownership. So I know you've been quite vocal, and people I think have been quite harsh on what you have said, but about Qatari owners, maybe I know people might know your opinion already, but they're obviously, there's a lot of links. They seem to be getting stronger, whether it's going to be a full sale or, as we said, James Pearce was reporting that it might just be a partial sale now. It does look like a serious interest from Qatar. What do you think of that? Basically, I think we know your opinion, but do you think it'll happen, and do you think it should happen?
Well, look, my opinion, just because it's worth clarifying, is I just want good owners for Liverpool Football Club. I don't care where they're from. What I do care about is Liverpool being a bit of a plaything for someone, and I also don't want it to be a sports washing front for regimes that that have the ability to have a greater track records on human rights and and the rights of women and gay people and trans people and what have you. This is not about individual ownership. You can be from anywhere in the world and be a good person. But when you're a regime that could change things for the better, and don't, but would rather have, a football club be your vehicle to make yourself seem more cuddly and friendly, I'm not as cool with that, to be perfectly honest. And I don't think I can't speak for anyone but myself in that regard. But the ethos I was raised in this city, the ethos we're taught is the core of what Liverpool Football Club is. That feels at odds with how I was raised on that, certainly. I'm not as enamoured with all the transfer stuff is also my thing on this. So I just want Neil Atkinson from the Rappers actually saying this again. We did a podcast with him the other week, and I kind of agree with that statement of I like Liverpool being able to be self-sustainable. I want an ownership that comes in and can maximise every aspect of Liverpool, but I don't want an ownership that has to reach into its pocket each and every season, every transfer window, and heap. And it wouldn't be debt in the short term, because obviously they've got bottomless funds and they've got to find a way to do that. But in reality, if they then go away and your business is sustained by people pouring hundreds and hundreds of millions of their own in each and every season, then you've not got a very good business. You've not got a sustainable business, and that's my worry with it. I want Liverpool to survive long after whoever the next custodians have decided they've had enough of it and move on. And that's the one thing I'd say on FSG is that they can walk away tomorrow and not put another penny in, because they've not really put any significant money in. There's a couple of loans here and there for the stadium expansions and the training ground at a low cost, but they could walk away tomorrow and Liverpool, you'd never notice they were gone, because Liverpool have got it all the money is generated within the football club and is spent on the football club. So look, it'll happen. In an ideal world, you want as minimal kind of fuss as possible. You don't want it overhanging the football operations. That's my worry about that as well. As Liverpool got a lot to get back on track, and it's happening already. People are getting turned into infighting and all that kind of stuff, which is really frustrating, to be honest. Because you guys, I'm sure, we're old enough to remember, the last takeover and the problems and how horrendously toxic that became. This is worse because it's exacerbated by the social media era. So yeah, I just want people to. I hope it's sorted. I hope it's sorted as much behind closed doors as possible, and we just get told it, and it's the right people have had their say in it. So Spirit to Shankly gets to weigh in and make sure that nothing untoward is happening, because they are, as a collective, they're the fans' voice on the board. And then we get a football-minded set of owners or owner who just wants Liverpool to be the best, but doesn't compromise everything that we hold dear to ourselves. There you go. Short and sweet.
That's it, yeah.
I have to say, I'm personally glad you brought up Neil Atkinson. That was where I was going to lead the discussion next. Firstly, I have to note, of course, I think Deloitte's rich list has come out, and Liverpool have finally leapfrogged Manchester United and are third in the table behind Real Madrid and somehow Manchester City, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But looking specifically, I think Neil Atkinson obviously wrote on his blog for the Anfield Wrap, and he was talking about his ownership position was summed up as thus. So basically, I ideally never want to think about Liverpool's owners. I never want to thank Liverpool's owners. I want all of us to be able to have as little to do with them as possible. I mean, obviously, we're in a position where it's almost all we can think about because we're thinking about the future of this great club. We're thinking about, the horrible potential reality of a petrostate and all the human rights abuses attached that might come with that. No such thing as a good billionaire, of course, but as we know, there are levels. It's a difficult one. I personally find it quite difficult. It's interesting from the sense of it's Liverpool and it's got to do with Liverpool and it's worth covering because of the potential ramifications, and not just from a sporting sense, but also from in terms of reflecting the values of the city, which is absolutely critical. But to what extent, I suppose, has it almost overshadowed the season? We know that performance has been an issue, and I'm not at all suggesting that is directly linked to the ownership situation. But in terms of a timeline, how soon realistically do Liverpool need to get this situation sorted so we can purely focus, of course, on the football going forward?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends. It boils down to transfer spends, doesn't it? And obviously, most of people's fears stem around Liverpool not being able to buy the players required to keep them competing at the top of the game. And my hope, and it is only a hope, and it's not to do with anything other than seeing Liverpool stay as a challenging team, is that I'm a business owner on a much smaller scale, but you want to maintain the value of your business. Particularly if you're selling it, I think it would clear things up if it was done sooner rather than later. But I also think if you rush things, you end up in just as bad a situation. So there's a nice fine balance to be struck there. But to the point of the current owners, there's no value in them to shrink the size of their asset. So they'll probably want to get out before you have to go and dip into like a £200 million odd war chest, I would guess. Is what will be required to get Liverpool the midfielders they require in the summer, if not before. But at the same time, it's a bit of a drop in the ocean when you're selling things for billions, and you're talking about a potential £3 billion profit. A couple hundred million really on the level that those kind of people operate shouldn't make a huge amount of difference to Liverpool and what they're doing. And again, it goes back to the happiness of the manager. If Jurgen Klopp is being promised things and they're not delivered on, his position becomes more difficult. Does he look to move on and then try selling Liverpool where they're not in the Champions League and they've not got the right manager? Hopefully it means that there should be more stability, I think, than people think. But I think from everyone's perspective, and I think from a fan's perspective, the chat about it's so boring and it's so annoying that it has to be a topic of conversation, because we should just be talking about the footy rather than the owners. It's a nightmare that other people have made for us.
You said Bellingham, it was your fault. So. No, I already messed. Sorry. Well, if
Liverpool should be able to buy Jude Bellingham, they should be able to.
Yeah.
There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to, because they've gone in the market previously and bought above, paid well above they've broken the transfer records for goalkeepers and centre halves in the past. Why would you not break it for a midfielder if the opportunity's there? They've spent the money when it's been there, and sometimes you do need to spend above and beyond your net spend. Ideally, you create a self-replicating system where you sell and buy. That's how Chelsea have done that in recent years. They've changed that and they've been okay with it. Even City don't go too mad on transfer fees. It's all the hush wages and signing on fees and agent fees and dad fees where their money goes, allegedly. But Liverpool should, Liverpool, but they need to jumpstart it. They need to jumpstart that sustainability again because of too many valued players going out on free transfers, which was a necessary knock on. But the Bellingham stuff, whatever, he wants to play for Liverpool, we should be able to afford him. It's just whether we're still the enticing prospect come the end of the season.
I mean, not to bring up the annoying topic.
Yeah.
But,
I
mean, not to bring up the annoying topic again, but we bring up ownership, and obviously, if you're looking into all the various components that make up the value of the club, one of the main components of that is the squad and the quality of the squad that you've got available to select from. And though you might think, right, 130 odd million that has been reported by various reliable sources, that's a 130 million pound player you've got in your squad. anytime FSG are looking for investment or for another owner to come in, you're saying this is this squad plus an £130 million player that's going to produce value for at least the next 10 years, or God forbid, get sold on to Madrid or whatever, depending on where the player views the pinnacle of his career being. I mean, it's obviously all academic at this stage. We don't have the player, but it's a consideration, I think. Sorry to interrupt, Pete.
No, that's fine. But that's it. It all comes down to yes or no. Will we sign him? And I think there's a lot of other things that can happen. I do agree with Paul. It's much more important what happens against Chelsea on Saturday than what happens in the summer at the moment. But the questions are there because we could be losing Naby Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Arthur Melo, if he still exists, and possibly James Milner. They're still not sorted. He's going to get a new contract, so it seems impossible that we can't at least sign one or two midfielders. And if it is to be the big name Bellingham, then of course a lot of people will be excited. But as Paul said, it depends where we are. I know there's been talk of it doesn't really matter if we're in the Champions League or not, but if we come 10th, it's not going to help us convince anyone to come and play for us, is it? But the best way to convince them is by beating Chelsea 5-0 on Saturday, I think, isn't it? So, but yeah, if we ask you, before we touch on maybe why you came on, but just ask you the yes or no question we seem to be asking everyone recently. Do you think we'll sign him, yes or no? And we can get off the subject.
Yeah, no, I do. I really do. It's just... it's a general feeling. There's nothing more to it than that, to be perfectly honest, is that he seems like a lad who's got his head screwed on. His family seems to be a good set of influences around him. And I agree that maybe the project might become unappealing. That's the thing I think that would upset this. If all of a sudden he's, you're thinking, well, I could go somewhere else. I just think in terms of his progression, I don't think Real Madrid are going anywhere. I think Real Madrid are always going to be Real Madrid, but I don't think you can go from Real Madrid to Liverpool. I think, unless you've somehow, I think, because we don't buy their top players off them. Players leave Real Madrid because they've not quite fulfilled that potential. And you can then go and get someone and reboot them. I think Ian Robbins a great example of that at Bayern. But I think you can go, you can come and do Liverpool. You might love it and stay for the rest of your career. Or you might decide a few years down the line, I will go and try what Madrid looks like. But I think that's the only order in which that can happen. So if he really likes Liverpool and he really likes Jurgen Klopp, then the only chance he's going to get is this summer.
Right, you read it here first. That's a yes, 100%.
It's happening. I mean, just lastly before we move on, I mean, I suppose the question is now is whether, Klopp sort of come out and said that realistically we're not going to see any more signings in January. It's dependent on a load of factors that every Liverpool fan is already more than well aware of. They've seen the press conferences, they've seen Jurgen Klopp biting at Karl Markham. Do you think that a signing in January is realistic? Could you see something popping out of the woodwork, or do you just kind of take what the manager says and goes, we've got the squad that we've got, let's just use what we've got?
Look, Jurgen gets frustrated because he gets bored of repeating the same, question answer thing over and over again every transfer window ad nauseum, and people are reading that as exacerbation with Liverpool's transfer policy. He's a realist. He accepts the situation of what he's in. He will always say, I'll work with what I've got, because that's what you've got. You've got what you've got. You don't want to be right. These guys are useless pricks. You know what I mean? We'll be getting them. I'll choose. You finish training. Well, hi guys, how's it going? Right, I really want you to run really hard for me this week, so it hurts. How's that sound? Well, no, actually, I think I won't. But he's always said, if a deal is, if the deal comes around at the right price and it's the right player and it's someone Liverpool want, they'll get them. They will. And we saw that. last January. I mean, we had Neil Jones in with us doing our Journal Insight show. Oh, no signings. And like an hour later, he texted me a little Colombian flag, and I was like, oh, Neil, and there you go. There's Luis Diaz is basically getting done, and then we nearly got Fabio Carvalho in under the door as well. Right before the end of the transfer window. So to mix my housing metaphors ever so slightly there. I think the problem is that Jude Bellingham is a £130 million player in January. He might be that in summer, but he also might not be. He might be a slightly cheaper player in summer. I know people don't think that's a thing, but it is. Like Enzo Fernandez right now is a £130 million player because that's his release clause. you know, if someone's desperate to pay it, they're desperate to play it. I mean, there was a point when Danielson played for Betis and he had like a release clause that would have closed a Spanish bank to be able to pay it off. And the reason is you do that because people are not meant to pay release clauses. They're not, you know, that most of the time they are beyond reach. And it's meant to stave off football clubs. So, you know, if somebody they really like becomes available, then they'll go for it. The best example of this really is Jurgen Klopp at Blackburn, I think it was, away, saying Danny Ward's our number one. And then within 24 hours, we signed Alisson because it just so happened that it became unblocked. The fee became more palatable, and they went, okay, yeah, that's the point at which we deal, and that can always happen with Liverpool. I just wouldn't hold my breath.
Yeah, well, I think that's what we enjoy, isn't it? The fact that they are always. They can go and get that deal, isn't it? You're just waiting for Paul Joyce to say, we're going to sign this person, and then you get excited because 20 minutes later it happens, doesn't it? But so, yeah, that's the subject of owners and signings sorted. Obviously, we know you're Redman TV. You do a lot of good work there, and obviously, you know, there's no rivalries amongst all of us. We've spoken about the Anfield Rap as well. It's nice to see we're all friends. Talk about you've done the recent series on Liverpool debuts. Obviously, we've seen there's like the likes of Carragher and Phil Thompson's already coming up, and that you've had on. Just saying, you know, how did that come about? Who was the best person to interview, and like what have you been surprised by? Anything you want to talk about, really?
Yeah. No, thanks for that. It was so when Steve Hall came to work for us last year, we'd done our Henderson documentary the year before, and we'd done a book around it. And I said I kind of like that notion of go and interview people, gather stuff, and then we can make it a multimedia sort of experience. We can do documentaries, we can do podcasts, and maybe we can try and get a book out of it in the back end as well. And he said, well, I've got this idea for Liverpool debuts. And one thing I've found is that, you know, footballers, they've got these whole careers and they're all fascinating. But what I really like is drilling down into small moments. And the debut thing was a really great unifier because there's loads more people who've made their debuts for Liverpool than there are who've lifted the European Cup, you know, or, you know, have scored a winning goal in an FA Cup final and so on. So, but it's the dream. I think that every Liverpool fan, if they've not had, they should have. We all wanted at some point in our lives to be able to pull on that red shirt, touch the "This is Anfield" sign, and run out in front of 45 to 55,000 screaming fans and go and do the business for the club that we all adore. So yeah, getting to speak to people and going out and going through a wide range. So obviously we've got the stars in there. You got Jamie Carragher, which is obviously far more my sort of era, but on the other end of the spectrum, you've got Phil Thompson there as well. There's two, you know, Scouse centre-backs for Liverpool, both won European Cups. One of them's lifted the European Cup. Bruce Grobbelaar's in there as well. And then in the middle of that, we've got a couple of sort of other different approaches to it. So you've got Neil Mellor, and then you've got Jim Beglin as well, who both had like really interesting but quite short careers for different reasons. And then Martin Kelly was another one who was just came up in a great little crop of young talents around that time, off the back of the team that won the Liverpool Youth Cup. So yeah, getting to hear their takes on it was really, really, really interesting because it doesn't get people, again, it gets glossed over. You play for Liverpool and then you talk about your big game. It doesn't often get spelt out like what it's like. I mean, Jamie Carragher scored on his debut. Martin Kelly had a couple of really, really good cameos early on into his, and so on and so forth. So yeah, so we took those interviews, which we conducted over the space of about a year or so. And then our production team have really gone to town on it and really blown it out and worked on the more cultural side of it. So what was Liverpool like at the time? What was it like to be around the city? You know, find a load of archive photos and kind of backup materials to really get a feel for not just their story, but what it was like to be a Liverpool fan at that time, what it was like to be from the city. And then we got Mark Monaghan to come and do the voiceover for it as well, who I used to love on. He was on Dream Team and he was in Brookside, of course, but young parents will know him as the more recent voice of Thomas the Tank Engine. So yeah, it was good. It was a good experience all around.
Lovely stuff. I think just extending from that, because I mean, it sounds like such a comprehensive viewing experience. So definitely keep an eye out for that. What's any exciting projects Redman have got coming up that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, so we're going through a little bit of a period of change and stuff. So this is our It'll be 13 years on YouTube this summer. It's longer than that since we first started developing the concept. Yeah, I know. I was a much younger man. Since we started developing the concept and all that kind of stuff. It's been closer to 15 since it was a really first kind of, at the genus of it. So yeah, and we've been in a fortunate position where we've been able to grow and take new people on, and we've got loads of new sort of faces in front of camera now. So it's not just me and Chris anymore. We've got Steve Hall, we've got Chloe Blockson, we've got Dan Clubb, Steve Plunkett, and Errol Smith, and so on. We've got and more contributors around that. So we're trying to make sure that we gear the content up. So we've now got we've got a squad for the first time. So it's not just a case of us all having to pull weight. It's not the days of the dream of a team of Carragher's kind of moments are over. We've actually got specialists for a variety of things. So yeah, we've got a bunch of new content coming out, refreshing some of the old stuff, bringing some of the old stuff back. So we brought the old studio couches back from their storage, which have been kept safe for many a year. And good. And we've got another. I can't really talk too much about at the moment because it's only early days, but we've got a new YouTube series coming out, which I'm very, very excited around, which we're doing some behind the scenes stuff for on Friday. So no, good. It's exciting. You'd think I'd be really bored of it by now, but I'm bored of people being annoyed with how bad it is when I've seen it be infinitely worse. But actually, in terms of the passion for doing content around Liverpool, we're making, I think, some of the best stuff we've ever done, and I'm really excited around the stuff that's going to come between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, I've seen you've had some good author chats on there as well.
Yeah, one or two.
Few of them.
One or two, mate.
Bill, it's been absolutely lovely having you on, Paul, and we'll certainly make sure to keep an eye out for all the latest content coming out from Redman TV, including your Liverpool debuts. But this has been the Empire of the Cop podcast. We've had Peter Kenny-Jones, I've been your host, Farrell Keeling, and we've had the lovely Paul Machin from Redman TV. Take care, everyone.